Much of the information and photos come from the Ladysmith archives and is available due to the prescience of our forebears and those fantastic volunteers who keep the records. The talk will likely mean most of those familiar with Ladysmith, whether through visiting here or living here, but I hope it'll also appeal to those less familiar who may have an interest in Canadian history. So sit back, relax in the comfort of your own home, see what Ladysmith, BC is about, and take in 100 years of history. For those not familiar with Ladysmith, this slide shows the location of the town, Ladysmith, BC, and I say BC because there's a number of Ladysmiths throughout the world. We're situated on the east coast of Vancouver Island on the 49th parallel. The area covered by this walk is outlined in red on the Google Earth satellite image of the inner portion of Ladysmith Harbour. The inset map top left shows how to access the start of the walk and its route once you reach our town. Turn off the Trans-Canada Highway at the set of lights on the southern edge of town onto Transfer Beach Boulevard and continue past the ENN railway crossing to the parking lot at the ocean front, identified by a big red star. This walk is approximately 3 kilometers route which starts and stops in the Transfer Beach parking lot. It's best done at low tide, but can be modified by the participant to suit conditions. It introduces you to the industrial history of the southern part of Ladysmith Harbour, pointing out surviving remnants of activities, along with photographs showing how it used to be. This slide provides background to the industrial operations of this part of Ladysmith Harbour. The Ladysmith area is the traditional territory of the Tsuut'ina First Nation, a people who have inhabited the area since time. The area remains unceded. Non-Indigenous settlement in the Ladysmith area started soon after the discovery of coal at Extension, a town so named due to the coal deposits being a southern extension of the Wellington coal seam, which had been mined farther north in the Nanaimo area since the 1850s. Access to tidewater was required for shipping the coal, and Dunsmuir, who owned the company for a number of reasons, chose a superb natural harbour at what was then called Oyster Harbour as a site for a complex of massive bunkers and wharves. These were constructed between 1898 to 1900. A rail link, in part using the ENN railway, which had been constructed by Dunsmuir et al. In 1886, was built to collect the mines 15 kilometers to the north. Between 1898 and 1932, an estimated 10 million tons of coal passed through these facilities, which were built at Oyster Harbour. First coal being shipped in 1900 using a ship called the Wellington. With the closure of the extension mines in 1931, the coal shipping facilities fell into disuse. The town felt the harsh effects of the Great Depression and faced an uncertain future. Luckily, a big windstorm in 1934 resulted in the blowdown of a large area of forest in the hills behind Ladysmith. This prompted a company called Comox Logging and Railway Company to purchase logging rights from the Rockefellers and extend their existing operations south from their headquarters in the Comox area. This company built a sophisticated operations depot at Ladysmith, which by 1943 was connected by rail to the logging grounds at Nanaimo Lakes, 30 kilometers to the northwest. Activity at the Ladysmith logging operations depot continued up till 1986. This walk takes you through where the coal and logging facilities were located, pointing out what was where by looking at period photographs and physical remnants. We'll also look at what little remains of an early 20th century shingle mill and the history of two other important wharves in this area of the harbour, both of which have gone. The area covered by our walk this evening is outlined against the 1902 map, which is at the top part of the slide, and the 1936 aerial photograph below. Both the map and the photograph predate the logging era in this part of the harbour. You can see a number of wharves and installations which we will visit. Of these remain. Starting out on the right, we see the government wharf, which was used for transfer of goods by road to ship and vice versa. The transfer wharf, after which Transfer Beach is named, which is a park in Ladysmith today. This was used to transfer railway wagons with goods between Vancouver Island and the mainland. What I call the coal complex, consisting principally of two main wharves, the Long Wharf and the T Wharf, and the bunkers right here. Further over to the left, we see the Shingle Mill. In our walk, we're going to start at the coal complex, arguably the most impressive of the lot in size and complexity. On this slide, you'll note an important difference in the shoreline between 1902 and 1932. Check this area out here. It's not present in the 1902 map. It's an area of land created by the dumping of slack separated from the coal in the washery in the coal bunkers here. This is a satellite image of the same area today. It's a beautiful park setting with Transfer Beach and an open-air amphitheater. The Ladysmith Maritime Society Marina over here accommodates pleasure craft. Our walk with its stops is also shown. It starts, as I said, at the parking lot at Transfer Beach,
which is an absolutely stunning park overlooking the water.
What I'm going to do is put an overlay of the industrial facilities that existed here in the early 1900s. We're going to look at the government and transfer wharfs later. And as I said, we start in the coal complex, the heart of which consisted of a massive set of coal bunkers capable of holding 9,000 tons of coal, which also contained a coal washery. These bunkers were approximately 60 feet high and were fed from above by coal cars pulled by steam engines, which ran on a railway track atop the structure. The slack separated at the washery was dumped from the T Wharf, which over time became overwhelmed by it and became unusable for shipping purposes. All this area here is slack dumped from this washery. The coal was loaded into ships and scows, principally by means of the loading wharf, or big long wharf here, which was 900 feet long. Coal cars would run on rail tracks atop the wharf and unload into chutes leading to the ships moored below the wharf, which were waiting below. Farther on land, in this area here and over here, there were sacking plants, coal chutes, and scales. What we're going to do is look at period photos and compare them to the present situation today to show what these facilities look like and give you an idea of their impressive scale. In order to ground you as to where each photo has been taken and what you're looking at, I'm going to precede the photos with this map of the facilities and an eye positioned where the photographer stood and in which direction the camera was pointed. Here's the eye, there's the pupil, here are the eyelids on top. So the photographer was located here, looking up towards this direction here. In other words, toward the coal bunkers. The size of the bunkers is immediately apparent. Each coal car atop of them held 25 tons of coal and was approximately 35 feet long. Notice the chutes coming off the side of the bunkers, feeding into these shorter rail cars below. We can also see office and scales buildings here between the bunkers and the start of what was called the T Wharf over here, and hiding in the gap between, we just catch a glimpse of the massive loading wharf. That's the one that was 900 feet long. This is an early photograph taken probably around 1902, maybe slightly earlier. And what you'll notice in this area here is there is no big washery shed on top of the bunkers. You'll find that in a later series of photographs. The next photo was taken from on top of the loading wharf, looking back towards the bunkers and T-wharf. Here's the photographer here looking this direction over here. It's taken in 1902 and shows a wonderful panorama of sailing ships. This is the long wharf or loading wharf. You can see the T-wharf in the background with a series of sailing ships all bunkering from here, and the massive coal bunkers in the background. Again, no washery building on top of the bunkers. The next photos were taken from approximately the same spot, but look a little bit more westerly in aspect. Again, the photo predates a washery on top of the bunkers. It shows what is a sacking area down here, and I'll show you a photograph later on to attest to that. Blacksmith shops and various office buildings and scales buildings. Look at the size of this. Here's a later photo, probably taken between 1910 and 1912, which shows the washery building on top of the bunkers here. It also shows an increasing number of buildings down here over the earlier photographs. The next photograph is taken from on top of the bunkers at the washery building, looking out along the loading wharf to give you some idea of its scale. On the left side of the wharf here, you see a steamship loading coal. In the middle, a steam engine with some coal cars in here. And on the right, there's a tug which is connected with a number of scows which are being loaded to transport coal either to Vancouver or to the state of Washington. We retrace our steps back over to the north side of the bunkers to look at a number of photos of the bunkers taken from this perspective over here after the construction of the washery shed. It's a rather grainy photograph, unfortunately low resolution, but we can see the washery shed here with a steam engine with filled coal cars atop the bunkers. You can also see rail cars below which are being filled from the loading chutes. A pile of slack over here is also visible. The area by the bunkers appears to have been important socially as well as industrially. This photo, dated 1903, 1904, shows a football match. Ladysmith, the team in the stripes. Soccer was a big deal. There were town, mine, and ethnic soccer teams, and mine owners were known to lure star players with plum jobs. This photograph, taken in 1910, under the lee of bunkers. And this is the Dairy Queen at the bunkers. After construction of the bunker shed, I guess they had to cut the grass somehow. The next photo is taken along the top of the bunkers and shows the rail setup. A steam engine shunts filled coal cars onto the bunkers. The coal came in from the mines along the track by the person's head here, and then beyond the bunkers, and then was shunted back onto the bunkers for cleaning and sorting. I have to admit, I don't really understand how the bunkers and washery worked, and it's an area that needs more research. The ENN rail line is not visible. It's actually downhill here and went underneath this area of access to the bunkers. What I'm going to show, or try and show here, is a video from the 1920s, which is on YouTube, and it shows the bunkers from the side and top. The first part of the video showing the bunkers from the south side is, I think, taken from the E&N rail line. Let's have a look. Enjoy the music, by the way. It's not my choice. The clip ends looking back along to the entrance of the bunkers towards what is now Methuen Street in Ladysmith, and what I believe were bunkhouses for Chinese workers. Now we're going to look again from by the bunkers toward the sacking area and back toward the Long Wharf again. Here you can see a lot of coal sacks in here. There's the Long Wharf or loading wharf and a number of steamships moored alongside, bunkering. This is probably taken in the 1920s due to the style of ship. One part of the coal complex that I haven't found any photographs yet are of the T-Wharf. I'd like to understand how that worked. If anyone listening knows anything about it, let me know. The next series of photographs is taken from on top of the bunkers looking northwest toward the town of Ladysmith. These photos are interesting in that not only do they chronicle the development of the town, but also they show the existence of fairly significant installations, some of which don't appear on any maps that I've seen to date. Although undated, this is an early photo which can be roughly timed due to the soccer goalposts here, and the absence of a number of key buildings in the town, the construction dates of which are known. The photograph postdates the construction of this building here, which is the Frank Hotel, 1902, but it predates the construction of the post office, which today stands at this location at the corner of Robert Street and the Trans-Canada Highway, which was then known as the Esplanade. None of the buildings identified in this photograph exist today. It also shows the two railway lines. There's the E&N railway line, which went from Nanaimo down to Victoria, and it shows the colliery line, along which the coal was shunted from Extension past the bunkers and then shunted back onto the bunkers again. The soccer game photo we saw earlier was dated as 1903, 1904. So due to the presence of the soccer pitch, I would estimate this photograph was taken about the same time. Also, the shape of the soccer pitch doesn't look much good. I'm just wondering where that cow was. They needed the grass cut. This is just to show a slightly more northerly aspect of this next photo, also taken from on top of the bunkers. The later date of this photograph is evidenced by the existence of both the Ross Hotel here and the post office. The Ross Hotel, I'm not sure of the date of construction. The post office was finished being built in 1910. Note also the presence of a large livestock chute facing the E&N railway here, and significant elevated coal chutes and an apparent sacking facility. These don't appear on any maps. Note also the Shingle Mill, which is just here, and the presence of the Smelter in Ladysmith, which we're not going to visit today, and its extensive wharf system further back in the harbor. The presence of a tennis court is interesting. As you'll see in a later photograph, there were more, and tennis seems to have been of some importance on Vancouver Island in the early 20th century. This is a now and then slide showing them on as just seen in the previous slide for comparison against the current park setting. This now scene was taken by Marina Sacht in 2017 from a drone. complete absence of any coal facilities and completely overgrown with trees. In the next slide, we're going to take a closer look at the livestock chutes and coal facilities. And as I say, the next slide is a blow up of this area in the red rectangle. On the left, we see the livestock chutes clearly visible bordering the ENN rail line. Look at these elevated coal chutes. They're not bunkers because there's no storage visible underneath them. They appear to lead to a system of chutes down here to a building which appears to be a coal sacking shed. I have to say that this setup here looks a bit precarious. Would you like to shunt a line of loaded rail cars back up that incline? How do you know when to stop? Do you have someone waving a red flag? Or, and how would you like to be that person? There's a bunch of other holding lines for coal cars in the middle distance. This one at least seems to be partially elevated also. The little building to the right of the rail line, which is the line leading to the loading wharf, is interesting. I think this is the scales or weighbridge building where loaded coal wagons passed over a plate in front of the building for weighing purposes. This just shows what the setup would have looked like. Here's the rail line coming along. There's a plate here with rail lines on it. And as the cars passed over here, they were weighed and measured by a steel yard in this building, and the weights recorded by someone sitting in the building. More about this as we examine later the remains of the scales further down in our walk. This is another view from atop the bunkers of the same general area, showing the steam-powered electrical generation, which was operational in 1911. 3 tennis courts side by side where the soccer pitch used to be. We've still got the coal chutes, and we still can see the livestock chutes in the background. If you look closely at the tennis courts, you can see someone in tennis whites. This was not a schlep outfit. People actually dressed to play tennis. And I think if there isn't already one, someone should do a history of tennis on Vancouver Island. Someone told me the grass courts by Cowichan Bay are said to be the second oldest continuously operating grass tennis courts in the world, after Wimbledon, I believe. This just shows aspect of another photo taken from atop the coal chutes that we just saw. Here we see the livestock chutes again beside the ENN and a number of town buildings. You can see the town is much more built up than the earlier photographs that we saw. Let's take a peek into the maritime part of the coal complex, looking at some of the boats that were in and about. This next photo is taken from way out in the harbor, looking back toward the coal complex. Dated 1910, it shows traditional canoe races with the T-wharf and bunkers dominating the middle distance. In the next set of photos, we're going to take a look at some of the ships that tied up alongside the loading wharf. Here was the bread and butter, one of the bread and butters of the operation, a Marpole Company coal scow taking on Canadian collieries Dunsmuir Coal. Coal was shipped in bulk from Ladysmith to Vancouver, various parts of Washington, San Francisco, etc. It was used as a strategic, Ladysmith was used as a strategic coaling port by the British Navy and powered steamships plying the trans-Canadian trade. These are 2 photos of the Canadian Pacific coastal steamships coaling up at the loading wharf. Princess Royal in 1922, I believe that is. I don't know the name of the one on the top left. Here's an interesting American ship, the USS Bear, taking on coal in 1918. Note the transition of technology on the ship from sail to steam. I suspect by 1918 this was a fairly old ship. This is an undated photo of the British Navy warship HMS Durban coaling at Ladysmith. I suspect it's actually in 1926. And the reason I say that is because of this. This is a photo taken from C.W. Dick's excellent history of the Timberland Development Company, Timberland, the Almost Forgotten Story. The Timberland Development Company was a logging outfit which operated west of Cassidy by the Ladysmith Airport, or Nanaimo Airport, sorry, jumping things there, operated west of the Nanaimo Airport in the 1920s. The photo shows the crew, or part of the crew, of a British naval ship on a day off, visiting the Timberland's logging outfit in 1926. Did this crew belong to the HMS Durban? How many British Navy ships were in and out of Ladysmith on a regular basis? Don't know. It's a topic that warrants more research. A last final photo of the coal complex, or almost final photo of the coal complex in its death throes, taken from uphill looking back down toward the loading wharf. Here you see, probably taken from the ENN rail line, it shows the loading wharf in advanced state of being dismantled. I don't have a date, but I'm confident that someone in Ladysmith will shed light on when this occurred. Okay, we're done with the coal complex, which is in fact the only lasting remnant on site, and it's a big one. We saw earlier in this talk that slack from the washery atop the bunkers was dumped into the harbor by the T-Wharf. Over the 30-odd years of operation, this dumping substantially changed the shoreline from where it was in 1902 to where it is today. This area here is called Slack Point, mistakenly identified as Slag Point by some. So this is where I get to play geologist. This slide shows a geological cross-section of the Slack Point area, as evidenced by test boreholes, shown by these vertical blue lines, drilled by environmental consultants Golder Associates. The thickness of the coal slack deposit in this area, which is about 5.7 hectares, is an average of 10 meters thick. It overlies the original harbor sediments and is locally overlain by general industrial trash bulldozed across the area. This trash, shown in pink, consisting of a lot of wood waste and logging industry debris. A back of the envelope calculation indicates between 700,000 and 1 million tons of coal slack are in the area. The problem presented by the slack is that it's unstable, especially so if shaken by an earthquake. It's prone to solifluction and could sloop into the harbor. The photos at the base of the slide show the stratigraphy of this industrial deposit. Here is coal slack at the surface. Here's surficial fill, bulldozed in overlying coal slack. This here, with my daughter's dog, Martha, for scale, shows wood waste and general industrial debris, and underneath the dog is the coal slack. And this photo, located right at the toe of the deposit by the waterline, shows the topography of the coal slack. Despite protective measures, active erosion is ongoing on the southern edge of the point where it faces the open waves of Stewart Channel. At this point in your walk, we've reached here, shown by a star in the satellite image, and we're crossing a pivotal point in Ladysmith industrial history. We're passing from that part of the harbor which was mainly involved with the industry to that part which was later involved with logging. As we discussed at the beginning, extension lines closed in 1932 and the coal facilities fell silent. The effects of the Great Depression, which commenced in 1929, started to bite deep. we saw that Comox Logging and Railway Company purchased logging rights from the Rockefellers and moved down their operations from the Courtenay-Comox area to Ladysmith in and around 1935. And they provided employment for numerous Ladysmith residents. Initial logging operations concentrated on the blowdowns and experimental logging of rejects from the first phase of old growth logging in the vicinity of the town. Later operations were expanded via joint construction with the Victoria Lumber and Manufacturing Company, which was located in Chemainus, of a railway to the Nanaimo Lakes area, 30 kilometers to the northwest. The Comox Logging headquarters was just up the hill in this area here from where we are standing now. The log dump and the booming grounds were here. We now move to show the location, our location on the red dot in the inset map of our walk, and I'll show that in the following slides. From this spot, as we look out onto the harbour, this is today's image here, we're struck by a system of concrete abutments, which are now surrounded by boats and boathouses. These abutments are what remains of a grapple crane, which was used by the logging industry from the late 1970s to the mid 1980s to load logs onto barges for export. With the cessation of logging operations in this part of the harbour in the mid 80s, it was considered too costly to remove the abutments, and so they remain. I'm sure there'll be a creative use for them someday. In this photo, we're looking generally north. We can see this area here, which is the coal slack. And as we look north in here, we look over the area which is now occupied by the LMS, or Ladysmith Maritime Society Marina. And this photo, taken in probably the late 20s or early 30s, we see a system of boathouses here where the later logging booming grounds were, and the Shingle Mill, which we'll talk about in a little while. In the middle background in here was the Ladysmith Smelter. In this photo, we can see that the wharf is beginning to deteriorate because the smelter was only in operation for a short period of time. And it wouldn't have been operational in the late 20s or early 30s.
What were they smeltering?
They were smelting copper ore from Mount Sicker, which is just north of Duncan. This is a photograph looking down on top of the boathouses in the area I just showed to you. These boathouses predated the logging activity. These are then and now photographs looking northwest over this part of the harbour, taken at a later date than before. The then panorama shows the early development of the logging infrastructure, and probably dates from either the late 30s or early 40s. In the extreme left, we can see what I'll call the original log dump, and I'll explain that in the next slide, and the beginnings of an extensive booming grounds here. We also see that there's no real pile of logging detritus on Slack Point in here, so it's got to be a relatively early stage of the logging operation. We're moving along shore to the location of the log dump. Here is the explanation of the first and second log dumps. At first, logs were transported to the top of the shore face and dumped down a very long, steep slope dump into tide water. This caused problems, logs getting stuck in the mud and possibly breaking due to their velocity gained by tripping down this steep, long incline. I'm sure some of the older folks in Ladysmith can tell me exactly what the story was. Anyway, later on, the setup was changed by construction of a rail link to a lower log dump in the same location. This is shown in the bottom photo. Another view of this lower log dump. Look at the size of those logs. Pay close attention to the steam engine here and to this arm set up over here, which was the log unloader, which pushed the logs off the flat cars. These two machines will become our friends in the succeeding slides. This is what remains of the log dump today. Once you know what you're looking for, you can make out the general form of the framework with the concrete foundation and the massive timbers over which the logs were draped to form a canopy so the logs could be rolled into the water. Here are some views of this lower second log dump from on top of the hill. Note the mountains of log debris on Slack Point in the distance. Also note the Baldwin diesel engine here. The Comox logging operations in Nanaimo Lakes were especially interesting in that they were supported by rail, whereas a lot of outfits were actually truck supported at that time. And they straddled the technology change from steam to diesel. Farther up the shoreline, we've walked from here up to here, north of the present-day Marina Causeway. These must date from the 1940s, as they're intimately associated with construction of the rail track to the log dump. That rail track runs just on top of the hill here. And this whole bank area was built out to accommodate the rail track. I know nothing about what these wharfs were used for, and maybe someone can tell me at a later date. In this area also, there is copious amounts of discarded cable from logging days. Going a little bit further north, we see a picture taken in 1908 of the Coburn Shingle Mill with the smelter and its stacks in the background. This is the tall, big smelter building a series of stacks on the smelting ovens themselves. This is the Shingle Mill. It was founded by John Coburn, the first mayor of Ladysmith, Ladysmith mayor 1904-1905. He set this mill up in 1903. I don't know how long it operated. Maybe someone will be able to tell me. This is another view of the Shingle Mill, taken from out in the harbor back toward Ladysmith. It's an early photograph and is definitely evident from the low level of development of the town in the hills above. This is all that remains of the Shingle Mill. It's basically a slight hump visible on the foreshore, which on closer inspection consists, apart from muck and oyster shells, of butt pilings, here and here and here, all over the place. These are two of them in close-up, and also brick fragments. Pretty captivating, and it basically doesn't tell you a lot, but it was an important industrial site in its day. Okay, what we've done is we've reached the northern extremity of our walk, and we now climb back up the hillside of the railway tracks which served the log dump, and we walk back south along this set of tracks. These tracks lead us to the marina area, where we encounter what's now called LMS number 1. This is a dozer boat of local design, which was used to sort logs in the booming grounds. There's a whole story to the local design of these boats. This photo from Robert Turner's excellent book, Logging by Rail, the British Columbia story, shows the dozer boat, maybe even the same one, certainly the same design, sorting logs in Ladysmith Harbour in 1983. Note the grapple crane in the background and the log barge with logs on top.
And you might want to mention that those dozer boats, I mean, the style hasn't really changed that much.
No, they're still operating in Ladysmith today, a slightly different design. So at the dozer boat, which is down here, we now go up a set of steps away from the waterfront to the area of the Comox Logging and Railway Operational Depot. Many of the original buildings remain, and some of the trackage, which is shown in blue. The site is dominated by the large machine shop built in 1943, which is currently undergoing extensive renovations. But also, the site features a locomotive shed, a car shop, which is not visible, it's just peeking through in there, a washroom, lunchroom, and a first aid building. Also in this area are remnants of the rolling stock associated with the logging activity, and we'll look at those in a second. This is a photo looking south at the depot, likely taken dating from the 1960s. It shows the Baldwin Diesel 7128, which basically took over operations from the steam engines. We can see the large machine shop with its trackage going right into the shop so they could maintain engines, be they steam or diesel, within this building here. And this is the locomotive shed here where the engine was stored when it was operational. The Loki shed, as it is today, was sized to fit large steam engines. It holds one today, while the car shop was designed for maintenance of logging cars. Today, it's used by the Ladysmith Maritime Society for restoration of wooden boats. This photo, the original of which was probably taken by Elwood White, check out his History of BC Aviation, shows a Ladysmith icon at work, Loki 11, 1923 Baldwin 282 steam engine, hauling flat cars out from the log dump to bring them back to Nanaimo Lakes for another load. Here's Loki 11 and its partner, the Humdurgan, or the log unloader, working at the log dump in 1958. This montage shows the ongoing restoration of Loki 11 by the Industrial Heritage Preservation Group of the Ladysmith and District Historical Society. The photos are taken inside the locomotive shed. The aim is to have the locomotive restored to a museum exhibit quality, which is not running quality, by its 100th birthday in 2023, COVID notwithstanding. As you can see, a significant amount of work has been done on the locomotive to date. This is a montage showing another Ladysmith icon, the Humdurgan, which is a locally designed and built log unloader built in the 1940s on the chassis of a turn of the century, that's 19th to 20th century, Shay steam locomotive. This machine is also being restored by the Historical Society. Here it is. As it is today, timbers replaced, repainted, engine worked on. The engine works. We haven't dared move the arm. Probably won't do that. The other part of the logging equation is this flat car used to carry logs from Nanaimo Lakes to the log dump. It features another Ladysmith invention, which were collapsible side stakes, which could be flattened by an operator pulling a cable on the side that was away from the ocean so that the logs could be pushed by the Humdurgan into the water. Other artifacts which have been or are currently being worked on at the site include a tube tumbler, 2017 condition, current condition here. And what this machine was they took the boiler tubes out of the steam engines and put them in here. The whole thing was powered by a little engine which turned the whole contraption, and basically all the scale which built up on the in the tubes was knocked off the tubes, and then they were reinstalled in the steam engine. Also being restored is an early 20th century boxcar. 2018 before restoration, and its current status where all the timbers have been replaced, the roof is being fixed, all the metalwork's being scraped and rust-proofed, and the whole thing awaits final painting. Two additional buildings in the complex are the washroom, lunchroom here, and the compact first aid building. The Historical Society uses the first aid building as a mess hall. The large custom designed machine shop was here, photographed in 2019 before the start of current renovation activity. As mentioned before, this building was the maintenance facility for locomotives, trucks, and other big equipment. The wall bracing allowed hoisting of heavy machinery on an overhead crane. Large double doors with trackage at the north end permitted entry for steam and diesel locomotives, and double doors at the south end without tracks permitted entry for logging trucks. This is a photo of the interior of the machine shop. The western 2/3 of the building was essentially a huge shed. As I mentioned, it accommodated locomotives and trucks in the north, locomotives on the north end and trucks on the south end, and had a complete set of heavy equipment to allow full restoration of working locomotives. The eastern half of the building behind this wall here was offices and storerooms. The whole building was custom designed and built by Comox Logging in 1943. We leave the logging depot, which is located here, and walk south approximately 500 meters to stop 12 on our walk, where Oyster Bay Drive meets Transfer Beach Boulevard. Shown in the photos here is the working mechanism of the coal scales that we saw in some of the old photographs of the coal facilities. For the uninitiated, the remains of this coal scales is hard to figure out, and that's because a lot of it's missing. The ironmongery that we see today is the bottom works of a weighbridge, which was located in a pit in the ground over which there was a steel plate and the rail lines ran. The loaded rail cars would pass by over the rails, over this contraption, and the cars were weighed as they did so. The weight of the cars was carried through a system of levers, which would translate to a steel yard via this lever here, and there would have been a steel yard located in a building beside the track. This is an early weighbridge. The two patents are 1857 and 1871. The company that built the weighbridge, Fairbanks, is still in existence, but is unfortunately unresponsive. However, I was lucky enough to get an insight into how the weighbridge worked from the International Society of Antique Scale Collectors. Beside the scales, we meet the impressive Tyee steam donkey. Built by Tyee Machinery Company for a logging outfit, American logging outfit, which is operating in the area of Squamish, called Maryland Ring Company Limited. It was built in 1923. It was a yarding and loading unit, and I'll show you pictures of how it worked, and first operated north of Powell River on the BC coast. Later, it transferred to Squamish and was then sold to a company operating in the Queen Charlottes. The Comox Logging and Railway Company bought it in 1945 for its Ladysmith division. It was originally a wood burner, but was later converted to burn fuel oil. It was retired in 1960. There's a large block on the front of it, which I don't show here, which was part of the draw works, a system of cables and spars and pulleys, which allowed the logs to be moved from where they fell to a loading area. Incidentally, the Tyee Machinery Company, which built this machine, was located on Granville Island and went into voluntary liquidation in 1978. Here is a steam donkey. You can see it behind this old spar tree. You can see a complex system of cables, pulleys, and wires. Here's the machine again, and it's basically reaching out into all the area around this spar tree, hauling the logs in towards an area where there's a rail connection. And this particular picture here shows logs being loaded, powered by the steam donkey. This may be the same machine, I'm not sure. I'm on the hunt for some Ladysmith photos which definitely show it in action. So we continue our walk. We were here at the steam donkey and walked further south, another 500 meters, back along Transfer Beach Boulevard to where it turns left to Transfer Beach Park. This is where our final sites are located. Going down to the picnic grounds at Transfer Beach Park, you'll find a whaling harpoon. This harpoon has very little to do with Ladysmith, because Ladysmith was not a whaling port, although there was some limited whaling along the east coast of Vancouver Island, but very limited. However, this harpoon gun is useful to us as it points to where the transfer wharf used to be. All that remains of the transfer wharf today is this slightly elevated mound of rubble and a whole series of butts of pilings. I'll show you what that transfer wharf looked like. So here we are, we've seen this familiar map of the coal facilities. We're south of the coal facilities now, and we're standing on the shoreline, and we're going to look at this transfer wharf. Here it is. Basically, here's the wharf, and you can see there's railway lines going onto it. And you can see a rail barge here with loaded wagons butting up against the transfer wharf. It's waiting for tide so that these wagons can be at the same level as the rail track and can be transferred from this barge back onto the rail and get onto the Vancouver rail system. Transfer Beach and Transfer Beach Park is named due to the former existence of this transfer wharf. I'm not entirely sure when it was built, but it was early and could have been built as early as 1886 at the same time as the construction of the E&N Railway. It was in service in Ladysmith until the mid-1950s, when transfer facilities switched over to Nanaimo, where they're still active. We're going to take another look back across the transfer wharf and look toward the loading wharf now. This is a photograph taken in the early 1900s. Here we are, here's the transfer wharf. You can see the tide is risen in this photograph, and the rail cars are probably able to go across onto the track here. In the background here, you can see the coal loading wharf. Actually, I said it was probably early 1900s. I don't think it is, because there's no action at the loading wharf. So this is possibly in the mid-30s, after the demise of coal and the cessation of coal shipping activities. This is a later photograph, roughly the same area, showing the transfer wharf again. But notice the coal loading wharf, half of it's missing. It's being cut down to the butts. I'm not sure exactly when the coal wharf was demolished, but it took quite a period of time for them to disappear. And I'm sure some Ladysmith locals will be able to date this photograph better than I can. What we're going to do now is come over here and look south along the shoreline across the transfer wharf toward the government wharf, which was also known as the dynamite wharf, because it was the wharf by which dynamite was shipped into Vancouver Island for use in the mines. Here we are looking at the transfer wharf, and in the background, the government wharf. Remember, the transfer wharf was for rail transfer. The government wharf here was by road transfer of goods from boats. We're taking another view here, looking from the south north across the government wharf and transfer wharf. Here's the transfer wharf here. This is the government wharf, which disappears behind these Canadian Pacific rail cars. And in the background, we can see the loading wharf, bunkers with the washery building on top, T-wharf in the far background. But notice the sailing ship. This indicates this is a fairly early photograph, probably early 1900s. One more photograph of the government wharf looking right down the wharf. And believe it or not, it's a postcard. I'm not sure who would really want to buy a postcard of a wharf looking like that, but maybe it's their cousin driving the wagon. I don't know. This is a view taken relatively recently, possibly early to mid 1990s, south from Transfer Beach, over across Transfer Beach. The Transfer Wharf has disappeared, but we can still see the government wharf. I believe the government wharf was demolished in the late 1990s. These two photographs show Transfer Beach Park and the open-air amphitheater, which now occupy the formal industrial coal site. Both these parks are a testament to the Ladysmith community, as they were built with considerable volunteer sweat equity and financial contribution. Transfer Beach Park dates from the mid-1960s, and its completion was celebrated with a big centennial do on July the 1st, 1967. It being built during when Kay Gruel was mayor of Ladysmith. Interestingly enough, all the heavy ground moving and sculpting was done free of charge by Malaspina, which is now part of the Vancouver Island University, as a practice session for their heavy equipment operators classes. The amphitheater was a Millennium project built during Rob Hutchins' stint as mayor, and it was built 1999-2000 and was its completion celebrated with the Millennium. Take time in Ladysmith to stroll the amphitheater and read the plaques celebrating local contributions towards its construction. Take time to enjoy the peaceful surroundings and also think about the industrial past of this area. So what about the future? What does it hold for this part of Ladysmith Harbour? The town unveiled in 2019 an ambitious waterfront development plan which blends leisure, living, and working. It features an arts and heritage hub centered on the Comox logging depot. The ongoing renovation and seismic proofing of the Comox machine shop, which I'm showing here, is a first stage in making this plan a reality. The community has shown in the past that it can work together to get things done, and we're sure that this spirit will continue and will transform what was an industrial center for almost 100 years into a waterfront paradise. That's the end of the talk. It is just a list of things, if anyone's interested, of work that can be done with regards to future research into what I've just covered.